Welcome back to the Hope Unscripted podcast. Today, my co-host is Hannah Qualls, who is our wellness manager at Hope Cancer Resources. And we're very honored to have Dr. Courtney Book from True Dermatology with us today as we talk about skin cancer awareness. May is Skin Cancer Awareness Month, and so thinking about all the importance of education, early detection, and prevention is super important. Dr. Book, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. And Hannah, thank you for being on with us too.
Yes, I'm happy to be back.
Yes. So Dr. Book, to get us kind of started, let's just talk about you and how you got into dermatology, what kind of drove you to that work and things like that.
Yeah. So I did not go to med school to be a dermatologist. I went to med school to be a pediatrician.
Okay. Big jump.
Yeah. So I thought I was going to be a pediatrician. Really liked my pediatrics rotation, but also liked working with adults. And so then I was like, maybe I'll do med peds. And so then I was like med peds interest group president in med school and thought I was going to do that. But really liked surgery too. But kind of didn't like how I didn't get to talk to the patients. Yeah. They were unconscious the whole time that I was working with them. And then I did my dermatology rotation, and it was just such a good melding of all the things that I liked. I got to have that continuity of care with patients and see them over the course of their life. I got to see different people from the same family and kind of form those relationships. I also got to do surgery because I ended up specializing in skin cancer surgery. And my patients are awake for all the surgeries. And so I get to talk to them and get to know them. And so it was just a really great kind of combination of all of those things. And then I also really found, skin cancer and skin health, you don't know if the person next to you has high blood pressure or if they have diabetes necessarily, but like you sometimes will know if they have a really debilitating skin condition. And I found the kind of nature of that and the gratification of helping improve that and fix that like really rewarding.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. So how did you get into that specific practice, and like how long have you been practicing in the skin cancer specialty?
Yeah. So I did 4 years of undergrad at Mizzou. Then I did 4 years of medical school at Mizzou. Then I did 4 years of residency at Wake Forest in North Carolina. That's where I did my dermatology residency. And then I did an additional surgical fellowship out in at Scripps in La Jolla, California, where I kind of specialized in skin cancer surgery, specifically Mohs micrographic surgery, which is a kind of specialized surgery for skin cancers in high priority areas. And so
over the country to do all this. So
I did.
Pretty cool.
It was great to get like a breadth of training with that too, because there are regional differences in both patient populations and what you see. And so I liked that a lot. But also I started practice about a decade ago. Started in Kansas City, was there for a few years, and then we moved down here and have been here for a while now.
So you weren't originally from Northwest Arkansas?
No, I'm from Central Missouri.
Okay. That's interesting.
Not too far.
No, not bad. So you're still in the, all the weather that happens.
Very similar folks, you know, and I think that especially Northwest Arkansas is becoming more of like a melting pot, which is fun since I've had patients kind of from all different areas. I love that I get to kind of continue to see patients from all different areas.
Yeah, okay. That's great.
So let's talk about what about skin health do you feel is often overlooked and misunderstood?
I think just maybe there's a general lack of awareness of how much skin health feeds into your overall health. It is one of our largest organs. It's our barrier to the outside world. And so it's a huge protection against infection, also plays a really big role in kind of maintaining our fluid balances, as well as vitamin D production, which is really important for bone health. It also can be a really good signaler for internal disease. And so there are certain conditions that are not necessarily skin conditions, that some of the first findings can be skin findings that can kind of be harbingers for that. And then, of course, there are primary skin conditions that can have a really big impact on people's quality of life, mental health, overall wellness, and even mortality.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. So as you said, Brittany, May is Skin Cancer Awareness Month. Can you just give us a sense of how common skin cancer is?
Yeah, so skin cancer is incredibly common. Skin cancer is actually, there are more people in the U.S. diagnosed with skin cancer than all other cancers combined. And so I think that's why it is hugely important. We know that 1 in 5 Americans, by the time they reach age 70, are going to be diagnosed with a skin cancer. So there's a good chance that either you or someone you know will be impacted by it.
I'll be honest, a friend of ours just had some taken off of his face last week. And I didn't realize he had. And I went and saw him. He works with my husband closely. And they're cowboys. They're out in the sun all the time. They don't think about it. That sun hat did not protect everything.
Yeah.
And when I saw him, I said, what cow kicked you in the face? He just looked like he took one to the eye. And he said, no, I got skin cancer cut off again. And I was like, you don't wear your sunscreen?
Yeah. And I mean, also, if that's happening at a younger age, then unfortunately, and you can make behavior modifications, lifestyle changes, those kind of things, that has a huge impact.
Yeah.
But if it's happening at a younger age, like, that's a good sign that's going to continue to be happening, because a lot of that is water under the bridge.
That was the second one that he's had done. I mean, he just turned 50 not that long ago, but still.
Yeah.
I'm like, when was the other one? Did I miss all of this? And he was like, yeah, you just don't pay attention.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the biggest risk factors for people that they may not realize that they have?
Yeah, so obviously the biggest risk factor is UV radiation. Some studies have shown that up to 90% of non-melanoma skin cancers are caused by UV radiation. And so that's certainly one of the biggest skin risk factors. But also family history. So if you have a family history, that can relay both in terms of like your skin type. So more fair skin types, light colored eyes, light hair, that's going to be a higher risk because you have less melanin. Melanin can be protective. But also there are genetic conditions or genetic like genes that can be mutated that can place you at an increased skin cancer risk. Lifestyle. So the cowboy or the outdoor worker that's just getting chronic sun exposure, or the hobbyist, the golfer, the tennis player, that's out there and getting a significant amount of sun exposure. That's also going to place them at risk. I think for Hope Cancer Resources, it's important to note that cancer patients. So if you're immunosuppressed, you have an increased risk of skin cancer. If you are a survivor of childhood cancer, you're twice as likely to develop melanoma. If you,
wow. Did not know that.
Yeah. If you have had radiation, you're significantly increased risk for skin cancer in that radiated area in the next 20 to 40 years after that. And so there's a lot of different things that play into it. And there's a lot of other small risk factors, but I think those are some of the biggest.
Okay.
That's really interesting because, I see patients all the time and that have gone through radiation, chemotherapy, and they're wanting to try to do everything that they can to prevent any more types of cancer or their cancer coming back. So I think that's important that they know that, they are at a higher risk.
Yeah, because I definitely didn't think of that either, especially with the radiation part of it and where that's, we just did a podcast about radiation and talking about that. And some of it is so localized in that area. You don't think about that's...
Like, so breast cancer patients who have had radiation, like that radiated field has a higher risk of skin cancer in it, but also breast cancer patients alone, they've done studies and shown that they have, I think it's around a 25% increased risk of skin cancer, of developing skin cancer, not just in the radiated field, all over. Another one would be if you have a lot of moles.
Yeah.
So about 20 to 30% of melanomas arise in existing moles. And so
an existing one. See, that surprises me too, because I've always been under the assumption if it's a new one, that's what you need to worry about.
Yeah. No, so it's, certainly, yes. If you've got a new mole, not just if it's a new mole, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later, but kind of what to look for. But if you have existing moles, it's important to take inventory of what you have, so that if you've had a mole for 20 years and all of a sudden it shoots off a Florida peninsula or something like that, that's something that you need to take note of. And if you're not taking a regular inventory, then you're less likely to notice that.
Okay. Yeah, it's important to do those self checks and keep an eye on your body.
Yeah, for sure.
Just when you're patient front seeing patients, what are a few misconceptions that you hear from your patients that they're like, oh, well, I thought this, but...
Yeah, so this time of year, we actually did, I work with our social media, and so we actually just did something on this, but the base tan.
I'm guilty.
I
sorry.
know.
I'm so guilty.
I know. This is so base tans only like give you like a 3 to 4%, or I'm sorry, like a SPF or UPF of like 3 to 4.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to like really protect you from a burn. But more importantly, I think something that people, I would want them to learn is that it's not just about the burn. It's about cumulative radiation. Burns are bad.
Yeah.
Burns do increase your skin cancer risk in a different way, but that cumulative UV radiation, and the reality is that if you're getting that base tan, you're increasing your cumulative UV radiation, you're increasing the chances for that DNA to get damaged, and you're giving yourself very little risk reduction by doing it. So base tans, I would say, is one thing. I think a lot of times people think, oh, skin cancer just happens in older people. And that's
definitely not true.
Yeah. So it's what, melanoma amongst like people under 50, it's top 3 for both women and men. And so it's not, and the incidence of melanoma in young people is increasing. And so that's definitely something that I would like people to know. Certainly it is more common in elderly people because, again, it's that cumulative UV radiation. And so the longer that you're accumulating, the more likely you are to form it. But the incidence is increasing in young people as well. Also, I think people maybe with skin of color think, oh, I don't burn. And because I don't burn, I don't have to worry about this. And it kind of goes back to that same philosophy with the base tan. Having a melanin in your skin is a protective method that does decrease how much of that UV radiation gets down and can damage the cells, but it doesn't block it. It just decreases it. And so you can still get those mutations. And actually people that have skin, more pigmented skin, a lot of times have worse outcomes with skin cancer because it's found at a later stage. Or for instance, in skin of color, the melanoma, the most common site is the foot instead of here or here or here.
There's not as much down there.
It's a different type. It's called acral lentiginous melanoma. It's actually what Bob Marley died from. But it's just, they're different.
I did not know that.
Yeah. He had a melanoma on his foot and he tried to treat it with different methods and, more holistic, which that's great for a lot of things, but for that particular thing, what did not work for him. And, but in skin of color, there are different risks and different skin, what's common is different, but you can still get it.
Yeah. Okay. That's insane to me. That just shocks me. I had no idea about that, but it's an interesting fact too to think about because I do see a lot of people that we've got friends that are skin color and they don't ever wear sunscreen because they don't feel the burn, they don't see the burn, they don't think about the burn or anything like that, but it's definitely still there. And
they're less likely to burn. And so I think that sometimes that's the only motivating factor for sunscreen, right? I just don't want the discomfort of the burn even is the motivating factor. So if you're not getting that, I understand why there's a little bit of a lack of motivation to do that. But the reality is you're still accumulating that damage, and not just from a skin cancer standpoint, but also from a photo aging.
So I know that there is some good benefit to some sun exposure. So what's the difference between healthy sun exposure and more damaging sun exposure?
Yeah, so we kind of briefly touched on vitamin D. Vitamin D is really important to our body, and you do want to get a little bit of sun exposure. As a skin cancer surgeon, I sometimes surprise my patients. I'm I don't want you to not go outside. I don't want you to not be, because it's also very important to be active. And if you get a patient that's had 30 skin cancers and gets so weary and scared of it, they'll be, I'm just not going outside. And I'm don't do that, because you need sun. But what you can do to kind of minimize your risk, healthy sun exposure looks like not going out during peak times. So not going out between 10 and 2 when the UV index is high, not going out for prolonged periods of time without sun protection. So from a vitamin D standpoint, you really only need 10 to 15 minutes of sun exposure a day, and it doesn't need to be in peak times. And so get your 10 to 15 minutes. Love a good walking the dog at 8 a.m. and getting that. That's great. But try to avoid those more extended periods of sun exposure and avoid the burns and just that cumulative over time 1 to 2 hours on the weekends doing things, that can kind of increase your...
Adds up quickly. Yeah. See, and that's what I think about between my husband and my son and our friends. We're outside all the time.
Yeah. Like, kids sports. So that's really tough for parents because you're sitting there just baking in the sun, watching your kids play sports. And I think that that's really easy. You will do what you need to not get fried, but that cumulative sun exposure that you're racking up, and that can be tough. And so that's where I love like sun protective clothing. Yeah. And so sometimes sunscreen is the answer. It's always helpful, but I'm a mom of 2, like 2 little ones, and like sometimes sun protective clothing is where it's at because you get it on them. You've got the protection there. It doesn't wash off.
I'm impressed you can keep clothes on your kids. I'm running around naked half the time if I let him, and he's almost 8, and I'm just like, put clothes on before you go outside, please do something.
Yeah. But I'm pretty like naggy too with the sun. It's either the sunscreen, you get out, dry off, sit for 30 minutes, or you keep playing.
There. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That kind of segues us into like other things we can do for like prevention. So you're talking about the clothing. What else is there that we could do? I've seen people, with hats or different types of clothing. Like,
so I love sun protective clothing. I think you're not going to get many cool points for it, and I hear that.
But these days, there's some pretty cool stuff for especially little boys. Like I went shopping recently and got some of those fishing shirts for my son. They're fun. He loves them.
Yeah. My husband actually does some work outdoors, like doing mulching and things like that. And so he is out in the sun, and he has ones that have hoods, and he really loves that because when he is like out working, the back of his neck, his ears, those things are all covered, and that's harder to reapply, especially if you have dirty mulch hands, to reapply sunscreen. So I think sun protective clothing can be really helpful. It also has like little to no risk for like skin reaction. That's one barrier to sunscreen sometimes is some people have very sensitive skin, and it can be difficult. And so I think also finding the right sunscreen for you. There are so many different ones. There's a few things that you want to look for. So you want to have it be SPF 30 or higher.
Okay.
You want it to be broad spectrum. And then if you're going to be out for an extended period of time with any kind of sweating or water, then you want to look for water resistant. But aside from that, you can find the one that works for you. There's kind of 2 different types. There's physical sunscreen and chemical sunscreen. The physical sunscreen, like zinc and titanium, I tend to prefer those. They tend to be a little bit more hypoallergenic, and just a little better tolerated and inherently broad spectrum. But at the end of the day, and I know there has been like some concern for some people about what's in sunscreen and is that bad for you? And I think that if I'm being honest, I think the jury's still out, but overall, I think it's a lot of hype maybe about that and less meat of scientific data. However, if you're concerned about that, you can do the more zinc or titanium based. And if you're not as concerned about that, or if you are, but that's what you'll use, you got to remember, we know UV radiation is a problem. We know that is, a carcinogen that is gonna cause trouble. And so sometimes you gotta say, hey, do I worry about this thing that may not have a lot of scientific data to support it, or do I worry about this thing that I know causes trouble, and kind of choose what works for you? But I prefer the mineral-based sunscreens.
And I know that's what we have, our Hope sunscreen sticks and things like that we will be handing out soon at some sporting events, and we're excited about that. But they're all mineral-based, and that's what I strive to do too. But also the convenience of aerosol sometimes is there. But I know it's not the best. So talk on that.
Yeah, so aerosol, I don't hate them. Yeah. But there's a couple of things. So one, I don't like the spraying because you're inhaling it. So for the face, you should spray in your hands and apply that way. The other thing is you got to be really mindful of where you're applying, because I cannot tell you, our family went on a cruise for spring break, and I was just watching people put on sunscreen, and they were doing this on the cruise, and you're on a cruise deck. There's a good wind, and it's like, that lady down there might be protected.
Yeah, but you got you.
But sir, you are not.
That's when you see the people, they have the streaks and it's not rubbed in.
I've gone to the river, and a friend of ours went across her husband's back, and he looked like he had zebra stripes by the end of the day. And I'm like, that didn't work.
We were just talking about that in my small group on Sunday. Like, one of the guys was like, my wife did like this on my back, and she was like, no, you don't need to rub it in. And he looked like Zorro, like like and I was like, can I, not to be weird, but when I was thinking social media, I was like, can I take a picture? He's like, it's gone, you can't. But
next time it happens, take a picture.
But yes, you do need to rub it in. So with spray, a lot of times people just spray and go. You got to rub it in and you got to sit, because if it's wet and you're jumping right back in the pool, the reality is you're probably going to just wash a lot of that off.
Yeah.
So. Okay. But also then don't forget about just like basic shade structures. So if you're going someplace like a soccer game or something, and it's just going to be out there in the open, like an umbrella goes a long way.
Yeah.
And that can be really helpful just to give you a reprieve.
I'm getting ready for baseball games. They're gearing up and excited about it, but I've already decided I got to take some of my sticks to my other team moms out there, because we don't think of it when you're in a rush and you're running out the door and stuff like that. And a bunch of them have other children too that are off to the side playing, and we kind of forget about them in the corner sometimes while we're yelling. But yeah, we've got to get these babies protected too. And their ears, I forget about the ears.
Yeah, a good wide brim hat. Like that it's tough because I know that they don't look as cool. But Sunday Afternoon is one company I don't have any conflicts of interest. I don't own any stock in them or anything. But Sunday Afternoon makes a good wide brim hat called the Adventure Hat, and it dries really easily. It breathes well. It goes like this, and then this part goes down. And I know that doesn't look the coolest, but it's functionally really good because we spend a lot of time like this. And if we have a hat that goes like this, when we go like this, our neck is exposed, the back of our ears are exposed. And I do a lot of skin cancer surgery in that area. So I think that's something if you're going to be out in the sun for a long time, you got to make it easier on yourself and have those types of things. There also are supplements that you can take that decrease kind of the damage from reactive oxygen species that form and also provide a little bit of sun protection. So like there's one called HelioCare Advanced, and it has niacinamide, which is a vitamin B derivative.
I do love some niacinamide. I put a lot on my face in the morning. I'm one of those people.
So the other name for it's nicotinamide, same thing. But there was a study that showed that if you take 500 milligrams of that twice daily, that can decrease your non-melanoma skin cancer risk. And so it's a supplement that has that, and also another plant extract that helps decrease the DNA damage that you get. So it's kind of like an oral sunscreen in a sense.
Oh, I love that.
And that's available over the counter without prescription.
It's over counter.
Yeah,
that's very helpful.
Even
for
better.
sure.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges or barriers you hear when it comes to sun safety? Like, I think about my dad drives a dump truck. Yeah. Arm out the window.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of Indian in us, so he tans really well, so he didn't burn. And he looks great. He has a great farmer's tan. And he's got a white t-shirt on when he takes his shirt off still is what it looks like. But the arm is always out the window, and it does make me paranoid sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair. For him, I would say those UV sleeves. So like I have lots of guys that I see that are either golfers or they're drivers and they have that arm. And having a UV sleeve in your golf bag or having UV sleeve in your console of your car that you just throw on like this, I mean, that's easy. It's not greasy and you can just keep it there. That can be really helpful. I think barriers, one is just what you've always done. Yeah. I think I was a lifeguard. My brother was a lifeguard. My mom was a lifeguard. I think my granddad was a lifeguard. Like I grew up in a family where tan was attractive. Tan was healthy. And it really took a mental shift for me when I was in medical school to understand that like tan skin is kind of like the black lung of a smoker. Like that is a sign of cellular damage. And so not if you have natural melanin from the way, from your skin type, but tanned skin is damaged skin. And so that shift in your mind of like, oh, tan isn't good. Is one thing that can be a barrier. I think just ease, if you're doing something like golf or something where you're working with your hands, you don't want your hands greasy. And so finding workarounds for that, like a stick sunscreen that you can keep in your bag. And for golfers, they should reapply at the turn because anyone do it every 1 to 2 hours. So if you're playing 18 holes, you need to reapply. But I think just the ease of that, and then skin sensitivities. can sometimes be an issue. You know, if you can't find one that doesn't burn or doesn't cause a rash or something like that, that can be discouraging. But your dermatologist can help you. There are so many options out there, and there are ones designed for more sensitive skin. And so I think that's one that can be overcome. And then just occupations that put you at risk for that. And like construction workers, for instance, like I would love to see like a nice like wide-brimmed hard hat, you know,
They should.
in our community bike riding. And I do have some patients who have gotten to wear like a neck gaiter to protect the back of their neck or the arm sleeves to protect their arms and things like that. But those adaptations to keep you doing what you need to do or what you want to do, but still keeping you protected, can be helpful.
Yeah, you talked about kind of forming a routine, staying consistent. I have tried to incorporate a sunscreen into my like skincare routine in the mornings, and so I'm really proud of myself for that. But it took a little bit to like form that habit, and just like I tell my patients that are working out in the gym, you know, it's like small little steps. So if you had like a recommendation for like one thing that somebody could start doing, that's it.
That's probably it. Yeah. Adding a daily sunscreen is hugely important because a lot of people think, oh, you know, I work in a building. I don't go outside. I put it on when I'm going to a soccer game, but day to day, I don't do it. And again, it's about that cumulative UV radiation.
Right.
And so one day of going to the mailbox, driving to the grocery store, doing those errands, like the UV exposure that you get, which a lot of people think in your car you don't get it. The glass doesn't prevent that. So, but you know, or a cloudy day or something like that. But one day of that doesn't really matter, you know. But if that's a lifestyle change that you make, a modification that you make over the span of time, that makes a huge impact on your cumulative UV radiation. And so I think, you know, a daily sunscreen is a great intervention.
And see, I'm really good about putting it on my face. I do one every single morning, and then I use the tinted moisturizer that's got the SPF in it. But I don't do it to my body. I'll just be real honest.
That was
it's hard
my
to
next
think.
question.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
You know, I should probably be like, you should, you know. But I think it's about finding what works and doing the best that you can. And the reality is that, like, you have better control over like what the rest of your body is exposed to with clothing and things like that. That's why though, when you think about it, like there's a couple things. One, most reliable place to age a woman is look at her chest. Yeah. Because we start taking care of our face and our neck, but we don't do our chest, and it usually gets the same sun exposure. And so there are signs of this habit that we have, and so you might throw that into your, you might go down a little bit lower. But also if you think about like the elderly, one of the places that they most readily show the signs of their sun damage is on their arms. You know, where you get the bruising and the wrinkling and the thinning of the skin tears, the sunspots, always much higher on the arms because of that practice, because we don't sun protect the arms. And so, you know, if I know I'm like going on a road trip or something like that, like if I'm going to be in the car for hours, I will throw it on my arms and hands. Or if I'm going to be outside, of course I will. But on a day to day, I usually do my face, and then I do this with wipe off the excess.
I do it on my hands too. Yeah.
I'm like, that's too expensive to wipe on the towel. Let's go ahead and get it on the hands at least. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's jump into the ABCDEs then and kind of talk about, like, I've seen the charts for it. I know a little bit about it, but I don't know a lot about it. And I'm sure most of our listeners probably don't either.
Yeah. Well, skin cancer is like, it's the cancer you can see. Yeah. And so that's a really unique aspect of skin cancer, right? Like other cancers, it's really hard to see, especially in the early stages. And so for a lot of our patients, we're seeing if they don't have a skin cancer history or they're not high risk, we're seeing them once a year. And so the role that they play in doing a self-skin exam, similar to how you do like a self like breast exam or something like that, is hugely important because that gives them a chance to find something so much earlier. And I would encourage patients to think about that more as like noticing a difference rather than like trying to figure out what it is and going to GPT and like going down into a wormhole, because I think that can be really dangerous also. But yeah, there's the American Academy of Dermatology kind of encourages this ABCDE for self skin checks, and it's a mnemonic to kind of remember what to look for. So A is asymmetry. So if you have a lesion that if you draw a line down the middle, one side looks one way, the other side looks different, that can catch your attention. B is border. So if it's not a nice smooth border, if it's a little bit irregular or scalloped, or asymmetrical border even can be important. C is color. So looking at a lesion and seeing variations in color across the lesion rather than a uniform color. D is diameter. So most melanomas are over 6 millimeters when they're diagnosed, although they certainly can and are diagnosed at a smaller stage, which is wonderful. But that if you notice a lesion that's a larger lesion, E stands for evolution. So if it's a larger lesion and it's continuing to enlarge or change, or I also call it like the ugly duckling sign. So like if you're doing a regular skin check, your job is just to take inventory of what you got. Right. And if you see something that's an ugly duckling, then that's something to pay attention to. So if you see this spot and you're like, is that bad? And you look and you see the same spot here and the same spot here, that's reassuring, because the chances of you developing a skin cancer in those 3 spots at the same time, like, and they look the same, is really low. But if you see something that doesn't really look like anything else, or it's changing, there's a couple of things. First, I would say make an appointment to have someone who's trained to look at it, kind of weigh in. Also, I would encourage patients to take a picture of it and choose a place to do it, your bathroom, someplace where the lighting's consistent. Take a picture of it. A month later, you can take another picture, compare the pictures rather than saying, I think that's changing. When you look at it every day, it's very hard to notice changes. But if you compare a side-by-side photo and you say, yeah, this little spot, this area wasn't there a month or 2 ago, that can be really helpful. Now, I would still encourage you to make the appointment earlier, because I don't want to delay diagnosis if you're concerned. Right. But if you're thinking, I don't know if this is something, that can be a tool that you use to kind of be a little bit more objective about it.
Okay. I'm going through it in my mind right now. I'm like, is there anything that I've noticed? That you talked about.
Now I need to go take my own inventory.
But like you talked about people coming to see you once a year, doing their annual checkup. How often should people be doing their like self checks, I guess?
We like monthly, because anything more than that, and I think you're just not going to notice changes as much. And then anything longer than that, I think you miss the chance to catch something earlier. But as far as like some of my patients, I will tell them, hey, like for like basal cell carcinoma, for instance, most common type of skin cancer, most common type of cancer, that comes up a lot of times like a little pimple. And so I can't tell you like how many times I've had a patient like, I thought it was a pimple, but it just like kept coming back. Well, if you have a pimple that doesn't go away for more than 6 to 8 weeks, then I would say, hey, give us a call. Let's take a look at that and make sure that's a pimple. Because anything inflammatory or anything that's not worrisome, that's new, is going to be steady, or it's going to go away. And so I think once a month is kind of a sweet spot where you're taking enough inventory to notice if something changes, but not doing it so often that you get a little numb to it.
So thinking about some of these different skin cancers, and we see different kinds of cancer patients all the time in their journeys, what does treating skin cancer look like on just for the common skin cancer, okay?
Yeah. So it has a lot to do with like what stage it's at when we find it. So early detection is really helpful, which is why it's so great to do the skin checks and do the self checks. Because if we find things early, skin cancer, like most times we can cure it, and I think that's both the blessing and the curse of skin cancer, right? Because I think a lot of times people are less concerned about skin cancer because we've gotten really good at detecting and curing it. And it's relatively easy to do that compared to some other cancer types. However, when it's left untreated, it can really wreak havoc on people's quality of life and their life. And so I think that for the average skin cancer patient, they come in, we identify a spot, we biopsy it. We get the results back from that, shows a skin cancer. Depending on what the skin cancer is and kind of how deep it is in the skin will determine kind of what the treatment options are. Okay. So if we catch it earlier and it's kind of skirting along the surface of the skin, sometimes we can do less invasive things like a topical cream or scraping and cauterizing the area to cause like superficial tissue destruction. That's a very quick procedure, 10 minutes and you're done. And so that's great when we can do that. If it's a little bit deeper in certain locations, we'll do a standard excision. So just getting a margin around it. That margin is determined by the type of skin cancer and research. And then we will cut that out and sew it up. That's usually a separate appointment from a regular skin check, but does well. And then if it's skin cancer on the head, neck, hands, feet, genitalia, places where real estate's kind of at a premium, and you want to take as little as possible and make it look as nice as possible. Then for the non-melanoma skin cancers, we will sometimes do Mohs surgery, which is what I do. Mohs surgery is a different way of processing the tissue where you look at 100% of the true margin while the patient's waiting. So you take it out with a very tight margin and look at it under the microscope. So the surgeon is the person who's also reading the slides for that. And so you're looking at that and getting live feedback of, oh, there's a little bit right here at 8 o'clock I'm going to go back and take a little bit more at 8 o'clock. And so you kind of do that process until it's all out, all done in a day usually. And then we do the repair after that. So.
Gotcha. And what's a repair? Like, is that like a skin graft sometimes? Or?
Yeah. So it really varies. Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as, linear stitches sometimes and a lot of times. But we certainly do flaps, grafts. And sometimes we have to send patients into the OR for, to take some bone out because it's gone down to that or more extensive things. It just depends on kind of what we encounter in surgery.
So it feels like there's, several different, methods of invasion or, some of it might be a little bit more than what a patient's looking for, but, you want to make sure you get it all. So I can see why some people might be a little anxious or nervous about coming to see you. What would you say to people that are kind of maybe putting that appointment off because they know they're probably going to have some type of surgery or...
Yeah. Well, I think that putting it off doesn't change what it is probably the first thing. I understand that. I understand that can be really, and I see and try and help those patients often, but it doesn't change what it is, and putting it off only lets it get worse.
Yeah.
And so that would probably be my first message. I've just this week had a patient that had a spot that they let kind of marinate, we'll say, for years. And man, if I could have seen that patient 5 years ago, they would have been in and out in a couple of hours, but instead they spent the entire day with me. Yeah. And I think that the opportunity to try and treat things as early as we can is a great one. But I understand that there are fears about that. Secondly, I'd say we're really nice people, like we're
the nicest doctors considering like some of it's not like going to podiatrist is the foot doctor, right?
I can't throw shade on any of my colleagues.
I'd rather see a skin doctor than some other one sometimes.
But no, we believe really strongly in treating people right and trying to do right by them. We're never going to do something that we think is unnecessary. We're always going to try and treat you like you're a family member, like we would want our family member to be treated. Yeah. And so I think having faith and comfort in knowing that is important because it can be scary. But I think that also say you have a skin cancer and you just wanted to know it's a skin cancer, but then you don't want to do the treatment that I've recommended. Well, at the end of the day, I feel like my job is to give you all the information, be a resource to answer the questions that you have, and a tool to help facilitate treating it. But it's at the end of the day, it's your decision and it's your body. And so I want patients to know that we're a resource. We're always going to give them our most heartfelt and thoughtful recommendations. But that doesn't mean that they lose control over what happens to their body.
Right. Yeah, you're equipping them with the tools to make that decision.
Yeah.
And then also feel confident in you wanting to do the procedure and trusting you.
For sure.
Yeah, not knowing doesn't serve them any, and sometimes creates more anxiety than actually knowing and feeling empowered to make a difference or make a change.
Yeah.
Well, we just have a couple minutes left. It's gone by so fast, to be honest with you. What is one simple habit that someone can start this week to make a difference and try to prevent skin cancer?
I would say daily sunscreen. Yeah, I would say daily morning sunscreen.
Yeah.
I think that just decreasing your cumulative UV radiation can be really helpful. If I got to pick one more, it would be self skin checks.
Yeah.
You know, just making sure that you are taking inventory of what you have, and if you aren't in a position to be able to see your back or your back of your legs or those types of things, then come see us and we can help, you know, because those are areas, the back and the legs are actually some of the highest sites for melanoma. And so that's important to be able to get that seen.
Hannah, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. We're super grateful that you came on our podcast.
I know, I feel like I've
learned a lot.
I've got a lot of intel in my brain now to think about and go home and yell at my husband to put sunscreen on more now.
Good. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. I'm so thankful for the opportunity to get some education and awareness about skin cancer out there.
Yes, no, I appreciate it so much. Well, in honor of Skin Cancer Awareness Month, everybody make sure you're doing your skin checks, putting your sunscreen on. If you have any questions, go see Dr. Book at True Dermatology or your local dermatologist. There's so many in this area that we partner with, and we appreciate so much. Thank you, Hannah, for joining me today. It was so fun. If you guys felt inspired by today's episode, be sure to share it with someone else and tell them to put their sunscreen on also. And thank you again, Dr. Book. I hope you guys tune in for the next episode of Hope Unscripted. Bye.